The way that this thing begins is like the way any cinematic depiction of a flashback or a dream. Yes, yes, exactly. Hey, everybody out there. Welcome back to another episode of the Audiophiles. I'm Andy. That is John, and we are here to chop up some music in the form of a certain song by certain artists, neither of which I yet know. So, John, please, what are we working with today?
So, if your memory serves you well, the appearance of the sinister dummies behind me means that we are going back to a band we covered before, the Soft Boys.
Ah, okay. Only once, though, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So it's not
So,
like I have a well to draw from as far as experience listening to these guys is concerned.
no, not at all. So this track is not off this album, but I don't have any others on vinyl, so that's why it's in there. Um,
Makes sense?
this is a song called Mr. Kennedy.
Oh, God, there's been so many like over the last several months. There's been all these things that bring me back to the Kennedys for some reason. In a handful of the songs that we've done, this one is at least based off title alone the most overt. But yeah, let me go off, give this thing a listen, and I'll come back and let you know what I think. And you can tell me that has absolutely nothing to do with the Kennedys, which it may or may not. So cool. Let me go scope this thing out, and I will be back shortly.
Coming into Harrisburg.
Harrisburg, right out of the gate, huh? Yeah, I know we're just in the opening bits of the song, 12 seconds. And we've got a pause already. Like, come on, Branch, just play the damn song. But no, it starts off with this really interesting like dreamscape like sound, like that cliche sound you hear whenever there's like a dreamscape in, or a flashback in a film or a television show, and it kind of sounds like sitar like. And then there's some interesting synthy stuff happening beneath that. And I think this kind of like plucking 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 kind of motif on what I think is the guitar. Yeah, interesting start to begin with. Got some kind of mysterious sounds already, and and an allusion to Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, which I was not expecting, if I'm going to be completely honest. I would have had the if one was set at the over under on references to the capital of the state of Pennsylvania, I would have taken the under. But yeah, let's kind of replay that beginning again. That was really interesting.
Coming into Harrisburg. Never seen a body look so tense.
Tense.
Tell me, Mr. Kennedy, have you ever seen the clouds
Is that a
so
theremin?
coming into Cleveland?
Huh. Cleveland.
Riding in the van with Zebedee.
Oh. Jamming out to Sebadoh.
Tell me, Mr. Kennedy, have you ever seen the clouds so low? Maybe it'll rain, maybe it'll rain.
Opens up a little bit here.
Maybe it'll rain tonight.
Wonder if that's double tracked vocals or if there's someone else with a very similar sounding voice harmonizing with him. That's Sounds nice. I like how it's kind of opened up here a bit with the guitars and that added layer of vocals.
It'll rain tonight. Maybe it'll rain. Maybe it'll rain tonight. Coming into paradise, thinking that I must have been here once. Me and Mr. Kennedy haven't seen a blade of grass in months. Maybe it'll rain, maybe it'll rain tonight. Maybe it'll rain, maybe it'll rain tonight. Here she comes. Here
Ooh,
she
that's pretty.
comes again. Here she comes, as she comes, as she comes, as she comes, as she
Lovely.
coming into Pittsburgh, dreaming of 1,000 open shops. Me and Mr. Kennedy stretching out to catch the first.
I think I'm hearing like more of what I believe is like the sitar plucking kind of happening in the background. It's an interesting sound and an instrument that I wasn't expecting to hear in this track. So that's always nice. Also interesting, all these allusions to sort of the eastern portion of the Rust Belt here in the States with Harrisburg and what else we have? Cleveland and now that are in the Steel City. Interesting stuff. Looking for rain. Also, it sounds like that seems to be a running theme throughout this. Yeah, let's see where this goes. I'm quite curious about all of this, really, down to the some of the instrumentation, i.e., that sitar sound, even some of the synthier bits that I'm hearing in there, and then these interesting lyrics. The one who is the titular Mr. Kennedy that we're referring to throughout this, and why why of all geographic locations does this story sort of pertain to, as I mentioned before, this the eastern part of the Rust Belt? Curious.
Few drops. Tell me, Mr. Kennedy, can you make it rain? Can you make it rain tonight? Maybe it'll rain. Maybe it'll rain tonight. Ah, maybe it'll rain. Maybe it'll rain tonight. Maybe it'll rain.
Oh, that's like the musical equivalent to a gust of wind. Let me take that back a little bit. Ooh. It's like guitar and sitar. great. Oh. It's like the musical equivalent of galloping downhill with that descending notation. I want to take that back. I really, really like that bit. I'm loving this whole latter portion. Nice. They bookended it with that sort of dreamscapey like sound that I mentioned at the very, very beginning. I like that. Yeah, this song grew on me a lot as it progressed and played. Now, the first half there was absolutely nothing wrong with it, but nothing about it was like aside from some interesting internal struggles that I was having about like how much of that was sitar and where's like the sort of gray area between the sitar and the guitar. That was really interesting. It was, and sort of the lyrical allusions that were happening were just evocative enough to make me curious about the what the narrative was in this song. But it the part that really captivated me was that whole latter, I don't know, 2.5 minutes of this song, probably closer to 2.5, yeah. um where it really that's where it really sunk its teeth into me. I loved all the different noodly lead work that was happening between, I believe it was both the guitar and the sitar happening there for a bit. And then there was this interesting lower stuff. And I'm not even sure if that was completely the bass or if it was the bass at all or if it was just some lower notes on the sitar. I'm not familiar enough with the sitar to know its full capabilities. And mostly what I hear of it is obviously in its traditional sort of Eastern vein, not oftentimes, though we have on the channel a couple of times heard it in this more Western style or adapted to this Western style of rock and roll. And it's always cool to hear that. But I'm hardly, a professional or aficionado on the marrying of those two sounds and what a sitar can sound like when it is enveloped in that um, kind of environment. But it doesn't make me not enjoy it because I absolutely loved it. Also, really loved the way there was panning going on between speaker to speaker during the ding 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 ding. It's kind of like going back and forth, and just that part alone, that sort of downward gallop motif, loved it. It was terrific. All the while, the bass and the drums were really doing some good stuff, holding everything down and keeping it anchored to the earth so it didn't go off into some like into too much bill where it's just like haha. So yeah, everything sounded really really good in this, but it certainly was the second half that kind of sealed the deal for me and made me truly I guess it took it from being like a pretty good song to being like, yeah, I really enjoyed it actually. Which is great. I don't know if I enjoyed this as much as the other track that we did by them. I don't think so. I'd have to go back and hold them up against one another, but I'm inclined to say not quite. But This song definitely had some very interesting and redeeming qualities to it that I think further listens would only further bolster um those sort of sentiments about it. So yeah, I don't know. Is it Kingdom of Love? Not sure, but it is good. I definitely enjoyed it. I'd like to learn more about this. Obviously, I've already stated I've got curiosities about who the Mr. Kennedy is and why the geographic location. I mean, there's this part where it's like it's been a while since we've seen a blade of grass or something like that, and with all of the traversing, it sounds like that's taking place throughout this song, that I don't know if it's about like life on the road or just travel in general. But it is interesting and it does make me think, but I don't quite have a grasp on it yet after just this one listen and only catching bits and pieces of the lyrics. So hopefully John can shed light on it and tell me a bit more about the track, kind of where this falls, um, on their timeline as far as their output is concerned, given that we have listened to a track by them before, as I mentioned. So there's only one way to find all of this out, and that is to hurry back and discuss it with John.
Charles Aznavour, he's back. So you've had listened to Mr. Kennedy by the Soft Boys.
Yeah.
Tell us all about it.
Well, let's start at the beginning. Seems like an appropriate place to kick things off. And speaking of kicking things off, this song does so with this interesting dreamscape like flourish on what sounds like a sitar or something akin to that. I don't know. But it is the.
Yeah, it's something akin to a sitar. It's called a guitar
Is
with
it
effects. Yeah.
Oh, it is. It's a guitar. It's a guitar with effects that causes that sort of like dreamscapey like sound. Okay. Um, I only said sitar because as the song progresses, I
Yeah,
think
you
I'm
get it
hearing.
more and more. Yeah,
Yeah, I hear sitar, so I assumed that was it. Instead, it wasn't. It was a guitar with effects on it. Which is interesting because at times, man, the play between that affected guitar and the sitar, it's kind of hard to tell where one stops and the other one starts because they really what one is going, all right, I will meet you, I will head westward to meet you, and the other one's like, I will head eastward to meet you, and they kind of dovetail into one another, and it's almost like, where the hell does one stop and the other start? So regardless, the way that this thing begins is like the way any cinematic depiction of a flashback or a dream. Yes, yes, exactly. So I'm immediate that made me smile. That old like mechanism or trope. And it's followed by like 10 seconds of this like 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 motif on what I thought and still do until you correct me was a guitar as well. And then there's something low and sustained beneath all of this, and it sounds very synthy in nature. Um, and for just a moment, all of this happens, and then the vocalist joins. Instantly catches my attention with this allusion to Harrisburg, uh, which is not a city often named in name checked in songs. There's nothing sexy or large and expansive that draws in tourists or any reason to really reference it at all, and it's not far from me. So, I right on Baltimore is fairly close to the border of Pennsylvania, and Harrisburg is its capital. So I've been there several times. Just odd to hear it shouted out. So he mentions how tense he was at this moment, and after he leans into that word tense, it's an interesting kind of delivery of the word. The bass moves around beneath that this almost radar signal like guitar sound, and then the beat drops on the drums. And within seconds, we get the mention of Mr. Kennedy, which jumped out to me, but so did this interesting use of what I believe is the theremin. It kind of has that ghostly kind of like sound to it, and it's the only time I think I heard it in this whole song. I don't know if I just missed it in other places, but it seems like a really weird thing to dust it off for like just a couple faint sounds, and then we're like, all right, pack it up, put it away. We've milked all of the theremin we're gonna get at. It's just odd. And then the next couple lines were treated to a shout out to Sebado. which is interesting. That also kind of jumped out at me when the singer delivers the lines, riding in the van with Sebadoh. Now, I don't know if this means they're literally touring together and riding around, or they're listening to their music while they're traversing in the song, which they do a lot of as the sort of narrative unfolds. You kind of get an idea of where you are. So again, really curious, and I'll touch on that in a bit. But after asking the titular character if he's ever seen the clouds so low, the guitars open up a bit, and we get these. I don't want to overstate this, but sort of like crashing guitar chords that come in and they open up the song a bit. The vocal performance increases a bit in energy and volume, and those vocals at this point sound to be double tracked or harmonized by another member of the band who has a very similar like sound to their voice, and they contemplate whether it will rain tonight. Now, I thought this is kind of interesting because, as I say, the song kind of opens up with this sort of like, I don't want, again, don't overstate it, but a little bit more of a crashing, louder sound, and it's almost like the clouds letting loose or the clouds parting, and with this allusion to whether it will or will not rain, seems to, it kind of matches. The lyrical content matches the sound of what they're doing musically, which I always am a fan of. The next verse begins, and there sounds like there is this bouncy bit of notation happening beneath the vocal track as the singer acknowledges that he must have been here once. We get treated to another chorus, followed by this bit where the singer contemplates whether it might come again tonight, and then he sings "Here She Comes" 3 times as the guitar and or perhaps even the sitar noodle away at the smooth but slightly twangy motif that leads us back into another verse. And now from Harrisburg, we head to Cleveland and Paradise. And now we're in the Steel City of Pittsburgh. So it's just really odd that he's traversing the eastern corridor of the American Rust Belt. Again, not the sexiest of places to be in the States. This isn't Hollywood or New York City or the beauty of a San Francisco or the culture of a New Orleans. This is just blue collared areas that have seen better days from an economic standpoint. So it's just really interesting that he's picking these cities. And the dreams of open shops and Mr. Kennedy catching the first few drops, something along those lines. He wonders if the titular character can make it rain tonight. Again, we're getting a lot of these allusions to rainy weather throughout this song, which fits the Rust Belt. Can't have rust without rain. And there's another chorus with more allusions again to the possibility of rain, and then the song slightly shifts, and we get what sounds like the musical equivalent of a gust of wind, as the lead noodles away at this wonderfully like reverb-laden sound. And there is something in the mix that has this this Eastern quality to it. I wonder what that could be. And is more confident than ever that this is the sitar that I thought I had heard much earlier in the track. So by this point, there are 2 lead tracks kind of playing in conjunction over this bouncy bass bit and these splashy drums that utilize clearly cymbals to get that splash effect. Again, splash. I keep thinking of rainfall, and I don't know if I'm looking for it because they've literally mentioned it lyrically or what's happening there, but it's definitely catching my attention. By around the 4:15 marker, these 2 lead motifs are almost ricocheting around the soundscape, and they have this sound like they are bouncing off one another, which creates this almost trance-inducing effect before the strumming picks up in rapidity, and there comes this. It's like a horse galloping downhill. This descending notation and the picked up pace that happens. Really loved that bit a lot. It was so much fun to listen to. All the while, the bass and the drums continue to hold down the song, but around the 5:10 mark, it sounds like the bass starts noodling about a bit, but it also has this interesting Eastern quality to it as well, And speaking of Eastern sounds, more sitar flourishes cascade around this bit, and there is a block, this like the striking of a block that sounds so much like the ticking of a clock, just metronomically striking in the mix as things begin to slowly come to a lethargic end as we get one last dreamscape strum, not on the sitar, on the guitar, as you've set me straight. And I have to admit, it took a bit of time for this one to grow on me. It's not that I didn't like the first half. It's just that there was nothing like really outside of the interesting use of the sitar. There was nothing that really jumped out at me. It was pretty conventional, and it's like, in the musical blueprint of verse, chorus, verse, chorus. And it sounded all decent and pleasant enough, but the music didn't really grab me until the last 2.5 minutes of the track. And that's when things got a lot more interesting. And for me, on this one listen, it kind of took the song from being a decent tune, and like on like an okay level, to elevating it to that sort of new height or next tier. I also have to admit, I think I enjoyed Kingdom of Love more than this, but um, not by some great margin. And honestly, to give you a true assessment of that, I'd have to go back and sort of listen to them next to one another to truly be able to say with any certainty. I am curious who this Mr. Kennedy is and what they're discussing as they traverse again the eastern portion of the American Rust Belt. So please, if you have any other interesting information or factoids, please drop them on me. All I can really think of is that, like, think of a band touring and going from city to city or town to town. There's this one part where it's a passing lyric, but he mentioned something about having not seen a blade of grass in days or something like that. I can't remember what the the interval of time was that he said, but it was something about not having seen a blade of grass or something. And that again just makes me think of not being able to, like, be maybe back home in your countryside, or you're just going from one concrete jungle to the next to play your music, and you're not really able to kind of take a breath and enjoy life for a moment. I don't know. But that's sort of where I'm at, but please let me know what you know.
No, thanks for that. Interesting. Yeah. So as discussed, previous episode we did a while back, Kingdom of Love, which was from their second album, An Autumn Moonlight. That one there. I'll put a link into the episode there. We talk more about the formation of the band and all that, blah blah blah. The band, actually, the Soft Boys, split after the release of Underwater Moonlight in 1981, and they briefly reformed in 2001 for the 20th anniversary of that album, which by that stage had gained cult status. And then the following year, they released a new album called Next Door Land in 2002. So, and this track comes from that.
Oh,
Weirdly enough, I've had this track probably around about from when it came out, and I've only listened to the album Next Door Land about 2 years ago. So anyway, we'll get into that in a second. So just to reiterate the personnel: Robin Hitchcock, the very talented Mr. Hitchcock, on guitar, lead vocals, who's also the songwriter of all the songs. Matthew Seligman, bass and the Moog synth. Kimberly Rue, guitar, vocals, Moog, and Morris Windsor, drums and vocals. So this new album of theirs, 21 years after their last one, got a Metacritic score of 79. Interesting little write-up from AllMusic who said, if pop music history teaches us anything, it's that reunions of once great bands are a dicey prospect at best. But give Next Door Land a few spins, let it sink in, and one reaches the inevitable conclusion: this is still a great band, capable of making superb music. As a guitarist, Robin Hitchcock has never had a better foil than Kimberly Rue, and their interplay on these songs is simply superb. His best moments with Rue recall the otherworldly six-string symbiosis of Tom Verlaine and Richard Lloyd. And if Windsor and Seligman rarely call to attention themselves as a rhythm section, that's one of their great virtues. With subtle precision, they support these performances brilliantly, and these four players are a band in the truest and best sense of the word, working fluidly as a unit rather than as four individuals. Is Next Door Land an instant classic like Underwater Moonlight? No. Is that comparison fair? Probably not. Are the Soft Boys still a strong and viable band in 2002? Yes, indeed. Next Door Land is more than a worthy addition to their catalogue and proves that 2 decades apart has not diluted their remarkable chemistry. And below that, there's actually a user review on AllMusic. And it says, the electrifying and engaging Mr. Kennedy. It's my favourite song on the album. It's the perfect track to show off the wonderfully inspired guitar interplay stroke undeniable chemistry between Robin Hitchcock and Kimberly Rowe. Note, it's also on the soundtrack of Jonathan Demme's much maligned 2002 mystery thriller, The Truth About Charlie. Don't know that film, but there you go. Jonathan Demme can be a bit hit or miss, to be fair. So yeah, I'm just going to the lyrics and I'll tell you a bit more. So, coming into Harrisburg, never seen a body look so tense. Tell me, Mr. Kennedy, have you ever seen the clouds so dense? Coming into Cleveland, riding in the van with Subado. Tell me, Mr. Kennedy, have you ever seen the clouds so low? Maybe it'll rain tonight. Maybe it'll rain tonight. Coming into Paradise, think I must have been here once. Me and Mr. Kennedy haven't seen a blade of grass in months. Maybe it'll rain tonight. Maybe it'll rain tonight. Here she comes. Here she comes again. Here she comes. Coming into Pittsburgh, dreaming of 1,000 open shops. Me and Mr. Kennedy stretching out to catch the first few drops. Tell me, Mr. Kennedy, can you make it rain? Can you make it rain tonight? Maybe it'll rain. Maybe it'll rain tonight. Maybe it'll rain. Maybe it'll rain tonight. Maybe it'll rain. And then we get the guitar break that goes on. Substantial portion. That's the song. Yeah, so my take on this is Hitchcock, who writes this stuff, he comes from that tradition. We talked about this before, but like Sid Barrett, where there's obscure lyrics that not necessarily mean anything. I don't know. I have no one has any further information on the meaning of this song at all. So there's no definitive thing out there.
It will remain.
Mr. Kennedy is just a shadowy figure. Do you know what it puts me in mind of? Which is probably, I don't know the chronology of this, but it puts me in mind of the American Gods by Gaiman.
Oh yeah,
traveling around and like, you know, it's almost like there's this force that arrive in these places, and are they going to make it rain or not? Will they bring prosperity to these barren places or not with their whatever their presence, their music, whatever? It's just this kind of strange and interesting. They're clearly sort of interlopers. They're outsiders moving from place to place and viewing it. It's just really off imagery that's just a bit weird, you know, in the way it's done, which is interesting, and I find it fascinating. And yeah, I think a true narrative is really. You mentioned the word dreamscape, and I think that's a really good word for this, because it does feel like it's not quite. It's just outside off the rails of reality a little bit.
And the way that they bookend the song with that effect, intentionally makes you say, like, you're existing within this thing, because we're starting and ending with it. So that would only lend credence to your assumed meaning of this. But I don't, you know, I wouldn't say you're far off. It's probably one of the better ideas that have been drummed up about what exactly they're saying here. But you know, artists tend to be intentionally obscure to allow us to use our brains after they have used theirs to create whatever we're listening to, which is part of the fun in, you know, visual art and audio art, like music, where you can kind of make it what you want it to be, as long as it makes sense to you, and that's all that matters. So yeah, interesting stuff.
I mean, I really like Robert Hitchcock. So his solo stuff can be a bit hit or miss, to be fair. I mean, there's stuff of his I really like as well. I do like his voice, and that sort of Sid Barrett connection is great. And I love Sid Barrett as well. But the guitar work, particularly in this song, I think is superb, and it does remind me of television. It also reminds me of the two guys who I can't remember their bloody names from Dream Syndicate as well, who work really well together.
Okay.
There's just a couple of examples of where the guitars mesh and interweave, and you just get this lovely, beautiful sound from the two of them. There's a real connection there. Yeah, so following on the narrative, the band split up the following year. Robert, and that's it. That's the end of the Soft Boys. So they did 3 albums.
Yeah. I'll tell you what's interesting, John, is that how long did you say it was between the album that preceded this and this album after their reunion?
21 years.
Yeah, which is about how long it took you to play this album after it came out.
Yeah.
you had to wait 21 years to get a new album, and you're like, you know what? Let's double it. I really want to milk this. I don't want to rush
yeah.
That's great. That's great.
To be fair, I did buy The Water Moonlight in 81, so fair enough. But yeah. So yeah, Robin Hitchcock continues to make music as a solo artist. He had his band, the Egyptians, etc. But his latest solo album came out in 2023. Kimberly Rue, and just to be clear, he is a man called Kimberly, a bit like a boy named Sue. But Kimberly Rue, he moved back and is in Cambridge. In 2004, he joined the Cambridge band Jack. We know about them. Which his wife, Lee K. Berry, already joined in 2000. The two also performed together as a duo called Kim and Lee. And his last solo album was called Purple Kittens in 2021. Of course it was. Matthew Seligman, the bass player, has performed with his lifelong friend Thomas Dolby, the Thompson Twins, the Waterboys, Sinead O'Connor, and Tori Amos, and many, many others. In 1985, he was part of the backing band for David Bowie's performance at Live Aid. He then went off and did a few things. He lived in Japan for a bit. From 2012, he practiced as a human rights solicitor in London and continued to play music until his death. In early 2020, in April 2020, Thomas Dolby reported that Seligman had been placed in an induced coma in St George's Hospital, London, after being diagnosed with COVID-19. On the 17th of April, Dolby posted on his Facebook page that he had suffered a catastrophic hemorrhagic stroke from which he was not expected to recover, and Seligman died later that day, age 61. Mm. So that's all the information I have on the members of the Soft Boys. But yeah, I just think it's a really decent song in terms of like a 21-year gap from a really cult, album. And this song has stayed with me since I heard it in the last 24 years or whatever. Yeah, it's I just love the otherworldliness of the guitars in particular.
Oh yeah, without question. They're beautiful. And that's
cool. I will wrap things up. Thanks for listening, Sandy.
Thank you.
Folks out there, tell us what you think. If you like this, please do hit the like button. And yeah, let us know what you think about Soft Boys. I really think Underwater Moonlight is a masterpiece. I think this album's decent, but yeah, tell us what you think. We'd love to hear from you. And if you haven't subscribed already, please do. We really appreciate everybody who supports the channel. That being said, thanks again so much for watching, and we'll see all of you on the next episode of the Audiophiles.
We'll see you later, guys.